Hello, everybody, and it's Thursday, the 17th of December, and that means it must be time on a Thursday for the 3-Day Friday talk show. And we're back with our 7th edition of the show. The year really has gone by very quickly. I'm your host, Michael Petch. I am the editor-in-chief of 3dprintingindustry.com. And today we're going to be talking about building an agile organization in additive manufacturing. As always, this is an interactive event. If you've not used this platform before, please do take a moment to get familiar with the options available here. So on your right-hand side of the screen, you will see the chat window there. Please feel free to introduce yourself, say hello to everybody who's joining us from around the world. And also the chat window will be used to submit your questions for today's panelists. So without further ado, I would like to welcome to the 3D Friday, the chat show, Gil Lavi, who is the founder of 3D Alliances. Hello, Gil. Elvira, León, who is the CEO and co-founder of ADDvance, and John Barnes, founder and managing director of the Barnes Global Advisors. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
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 Thank you for joining us today. So we're going to get into the main meat of the conversation in a moment. We're going to be breaking this up into 3 different sections. But first, could you perhaps tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, please, Elvira?
Yes, just let me share some slides. Yeah. Can you see it? No.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Sorry. The previous one. Well, to introduce myself. Well, my name is Elvira León. My background is as an engineer. I'm materials and aeronautical engineer. And I had also some training and expertise in business. I got, my experience or the reason of being today here is that, I have worked for several years in additive manufacturing, focused in the implantation of the technology in big companies and also in small companies. I work as a CTO of a center of competence in additive manufacturing in my former company that was ADDO, a big technological company. And now I'm leading a startup and CEO and co-founder of ADDvance. We work in the development and of technologies and implementation of additive manufacturing in different customers. To introduce our company, for those who don't know us, we provide training and advisory services and support our customers in engineering projects related with digitalization, optimization, and definition of digital inventory. We also work in the development of technology related with integration of systems, equipment, and software. And we also provide support and we conduct projects on integration of technology for distributed production. We count with different partners. Some of them are already here with us. We partner with the Partners Global Advisors for training, also with Free Your Mind to develop digital inventories and to implement digital or agile production solutions and systems for our customers. And we also count with the support of different technological companies that are supporting us as a startup developing technology in additive manufacturing.
Wonderful. Thank you for that very, very comprehensive overview there. Gil, perhaps whereabouts are we speaking to you today from?
I'm from Israel, and I'll present myself first. A few words about myself. So I'm 25 years in the printing industry. Back in the 90s, I started to work for HP and Kodak in their 2D digital printing divisions. And in 2006, I joined Object, which later on became Stratasys. I worked for the company for 10 years. This is where I learned, it was the best school to learn and to enter additive manufacturing. My activities were mostly involved building the company distribution channels in Europe, and later on working with the company's strategic accounts, all the big accounts that were looking to implement 3D printing across their organizations. And in 2015, I left the company and I founded 3D Alliances. And what we do with 3D Alliances, since there are so many companies in the industry, we provide mostly startups services to help them accelerate their business. And these services include the following three elements. The first one is access to funding. And this is we do with the business partners that are looking to invest in startups. The second is talent acquisition, help the startups find good and experienced sales talent. And the third, which is mostly most of our activities, is to help these startups build their global channel networks. We have a network of over 2,000 3D printing resellers from 74 countries, and working with 5 or 10 startups that has interesting technology, mostly around manufacturing. It's not another PLA printer that on the desk that prints PLA and ABS. Mostly looking for startups on the software side, printing side, and automated post-processing side, and to help them find the right channel partners and by that accelerate their business.
Well, marvelous. And John, people will undoubtedly remember you from your very lively trade show presentations. Of course, we've not had the pleasure of that this year. But for those who aren't familiar, maybe you could tell us a little about yourself and the Barnes Group, please.
Sure, yeah. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Yeah, so we founded the company about 3.5 years ago. Most of us come from a aerospace defense background and a little bit from medical. So predominantly OEM level, so users and users of equipment. And I think that kind of forms our perspective as users of the equipment and trying to get them into highly regulated industries. So we think about things from a part perspective and requirements and meeting those requirements. We've got a team of about 14 people now, and we work globally. We've actually done work on 6 continents. I'm not sure how we're going to get to Antarctica, but we're trying. And you know, part of our thing is that we're interested in the science, we're interested in the people, and we're interested in being part of the, as I put it, the fabric of additive. So it's important that we consider ourselves to be an engineering firm that provides its services on a consulting basis, but we don't like to be called consultants. No offense to consultants, but part of contributing back to a lot of us are. I'm an adjunct professor at Carnegie Mellon and RMIT, for example. So we do a lot of interaction with universities. We try to turn back some of our profits. We donated some equipment to Purdue. We sponsored a class at Carnegie Mellon. Those things are important to us. We serve on a lot of the committees that are out there. So we definitely want to be part of the scene and not just showing up at trade shows in fancy suits. None of us own any fancy suits, so it's good. That's also kind of cause and effect.
Additive is known for its fancy suits, indeed, and I'll try to avoid using the consultancy word too often, because I know people do take umbrage to it. But without further ado, let's get into part 1 of what we're going to be talking about today. So the title of the today's show is obviously to do with agility and talking about agile organizations. But what actually is an agile organization? How does this differ from the business models that people maybe were familiar with 20, 30 years ago? And, ideas that maybe came along with the advent of Ford and what's become known as Taylorism. So perhaps, Elvira, would you mind giving us your take on what is an agile organization? What does it mean to you, please?
Well, for me, an agile organization is that organization which permits a flow of the work and the knowledge between the whole organization, from the management to the workforce and also from the workforce to the management. That is something that, well, I have learned from projects conducted in the IT sector. Is an organization that permits slow and small interactions and small, let's say, improvements, but that at the end the results become before and become quicker than in an organization that is very well structured and that maintains a very vertical organization.
Okay, so I mean, we're kind of defining it some way in relation to what a traditional organization is. John, we were talking earlier, and you mentioned that you have a sort of map of how some of the traditional organizations would look. Perhaps you could share that with us and give us a bit of a walkthrough there and explain this, please.
Sure. So typically, you know, when we talk to companies, they have this very kind of rigid structure on the left, you know, where there's like a program manager or a manager that's instructing, you know, the verticals to, they're the flow of information basically. Whereas, you know, for additive in this example, and it's just an example of different types of advanced manufacturing, or, you know, if you want to really talk about Industry 4.0, it's the same, but you really need the communication going back and forth to those groups. The manager can't be the gatekeeper of the flow of information if you're going to be successful at it. And so we know that this is something that you have to deal with. And I think my reflection, you know, on what Elvira is saying is that you know, an organization is a construct for a company, but, you know, Agile also impacts on the culture. And from my experience at Lockheed Martin, for example, I viewed us as being very agile because we had a culture that accepted the image on the left, but kind of dealt with the situation on the right. You know, for us to move quickly, we had to have good relationships with people. And that was formed by in my organization at Skunkworks, you know, that was promoted from the top down. The leader of Skunkworks, when I was there, had very good relationships with the leaders of all of the organizations. So this information could continuously flow. And so I think that's a big part of it. I think, you know, reflecting on that, you know, we always talk about people. We recognize that the structure of an organization isn't going to change to accommodate additive in this example, or any of the new things. The structure is the structure, and it's there for probably financial or accounting reasons. So we kind of have to adapt, you know, around that. So, you know, we're certainly not going to suggest that people need to change their organizational structure to accommodate being agile. Mm-hmm. It would help, and you know, smaller companies can do this, larger companies cannot.
So I'm interested here, and perhaps Gil, you can share some insights. But you know, we've looked at a traditional structure. We're looking at what an agile organization is, but what are the benefits of actually moving from this traditional structure to an agile organization? Why would a company want to do this?
Yeah, well, when I look at companies and I define together with them agile manufacturing, first of all, I want to understand, is it on the management or corporate level? Is it part of the company's vision, or it's an internal initiative of a certain person, of a certain department that would like to transform their organization to more agile? And this affects the definition. But in general, I think to have an agile organization, you need to have the right processes, the tools, and the training to respond quickly to the customer needs and the market changes, but still control cost and quality. So company needs to have the ability to respond fast, to change existing products or to create new ones, and to reduce labor costs or any other costs, right? And of course, COVID-19 made it even more essential. And companies understood that they need to accelerate in that matter. So it's very much depends on the DNA of the company. We have some companies that their mindset is changing. They adopt changes quite slow, and they have their own reasons for plus and minuses. But the others are more I wouldn't say it adventurous, but they understand that in order to keep ahead, they need to respond fast. And of course, and we're going to talk about it later, this is where AM steps in to provide them the right tools and technologies to be able to do it.
And we've got a very relevant question to that insight there that's just come in from Marie Thibault. And she asks, from your experience, how long does it take for a big industrial company to switch to a more agile team? So, I mean, Gil, if you could give us your take on that, I'd certainly be interested to hear John and Elvira's insights as well.
Well, again, here the answer is depends, right? So I had my experience of meeting companies, and they said, okay, we want to, of course, implement additive manufacturing in our design and manufacturing processes. Let's make a plan. Okay, so the plan took a few weeks, a few months, and then they said, okay, we are good to go. But before that, we need to ask or to get the permission of the management. And then 6 months passed, right? And then one of the persons left the company, and then we have to start all over. So it's a clear example of, I know, yeah, but it very much depends. And I'm going back to what I said at the beginning. If it's on the managed vision, I visited the company, I think it was Schneider Electric in France. And I stepped into the website before I visited the company, and there was a certain slogan that had the vision of transforming the company, right? Not additive, the company, to a faster response, more green environment. They had 3 or 4 small visions. And out of that, you could understand how additive manufacturing can help. So the answer to the question, I think it depends. I think John has more field experience. I'm going with the partners, and later on they do the work, but it very much depends on the organization.
Would you echo that, John, or what would you add to Gil's point?
Yeah, no, I think it has to have buy-in, for it to happen. And to some extent, you can have a very rigid, organization. I would just look at like because I'm familiar with it, but the U.S. Defense Services, that is a very command and control system. But if they're not agile, it's very dangerous. So they, I've always said, if you want to see innovation, you give a tool to a private, and they'll figure out how to get it to be used very, very quickly, especially when there's a need for it. And so I think that is, those provide great examples. And I go back to my time at Lockheed, and I've been to some other places, and they struggle to impart a culture because the culture takes a lot of time. You started with one culture and you're trying to transition to a different one. And some people want to go on that journey and some people don't. There's careers at stake. There's egos at stake. There's legacies at stake. 16 different personality types. I think my group in Australia, I had all of those personality types in that one group. So it's very difficult and multinational at the same time. So, trying to get everybody in line. And I love the quote from Seth Godin in his one book, I think, Tribes, which was, quite simple, which was paint a vision of the future and people will follow it. But I think important to that is, as a leader, if you paint a vision of the future, you're telling people where you're going, and they can decide if they want to go to that journey or not. This isn't, it's not the 1920s anymore. We don't, the way that work works, especially this year, has been quite different. And to me, that's huge. If you get people bought into what you're doing, there's really nothing you can't accomplish.
Yeah, and that's very interesting stuff. And we've got a question that's come in sort of tied into your experience at Lockheed from Brian Crossy, who asks, what is the advantage of a separate insulated team, Skunkworks, if you like, instead of trying to push it through the whole organization? And Brian says, my understanding is that the quicker path can also challenge the company business model from the inside. So he's saying that having a Skunkworks is the quicker path, and it also helps act as a sort of a cell within the organization to change it from within.
Yeah, so I think there's been a lot of copycats to the Skunkworks ideology, and some have succeeded and some haven't. And I think that if you think about product development, the idea of a Skunkworks team who's not wedded to any particular solution, but coming up with the best solution, that was our thing. We wanted to be the best at what we were doing. You know, we wanted the best outcome in terms of the customer's requirements. And so once you have a product that's developed, that's a different business. You know, coming up with the F-22 or the F-35 is a radical process. Producing the F-22 every day should not be a radical process.
You fingers crossed, yes.
That should be a very boring process that happens the same way every day. And so, you know, part of that is, you know, we would get visitors and they would ask why Skunkworks has succeeded where perhaps others haven't. And, you know, I leaned into that conversation because I was the junior, you know, manager in that. And basically it was a tolerance or an appreciation of failure. And that's not a failure in and of itself. Now, if it's failure for the wrong reasons, yes, that's a problem. But, you know, failure is a point of learning. If you haven't taken something to its limit, then you don't know where it's going to fail, which is dangerous in that line of business. So, you know, I keep going back to the cultural aspect of it. And I think that, you know, we had, during my time there, we had a vice president, and he came in from the Air Force. He was an F-15 pilot, you know, a colonel. So he knew, very regimented. And he said that it took him a while to adapt the Skunkworks idea, and that, you know, we talked about information innovation, and he said, no, this is really about insubordination and insolence at some level. And he just had to deal with it. He wanted it to happen. He just wanted it to happen within some boundaries.
Okay.
Controlled chaos, if you will.
Well, I like the sound of that. But the word culture keeps coming up. And I think, you know, yourselves as panelists today also really sort of represent the international nature of additive manufacturing. Gil, you were mentioning, was it 74 countries you're working with, something in that region? So I'm kind of keen to know, really, you know, whilst AM is international, how do regional differences and attitudes and approaches fit with agility? Is this something you've noticed, that there are sort of differences depending on where your business partner is based and how they respond to the concepts of agility? Perhaps Gil, you could tell us a little bit about that first, and then we'll come to the others.
Oh, cultural differences is amazing, and I'm so happy I have the experience to interact with so many people from so many countries. But I'll give you a very simple example. When with the European company, I set up a conference call with a Korean company, right? And we decided to have a certain time and date, and the Korean guy was sitting in the suit, right? It was a Zoom meeting with his tie, with a notebook, with all the questions, right? And the guy from Europe, let's say time was flexible for him, right? So it was 11 and we were waiting, and this guy with the suit, and then the guy from Europe said, you know, he was not on the call. And then I called him and I said to the Korean guy, wait, I called him and he's at the airport. He said, no, we can do the call later on. It's a true story, right? So it starts with this, right? This is before we even set a vision of agile manufacturing and implementing additive. So it's a small example, but when you have a discussion about transforming companies, or let's say a mindset of resellers and companies from traditional method to digital, right? You need to understand the way they think. So if you talk to Japanese, right, or to Italians, or any place around the world, if you don't understand it and the way they take decisions to make the changes, as John said, you're going to fail. So if you are in south of Europe, you can move faster than if you talk to someone from Japan and Korea. So cultural differences is the basic. It was amazing for me in the past 5 years to understand even that there is a difference between same country, the northern people from the northern part of the southern part, right? Mm-hmm. Even though it's the same country. So it takes time to understand it. Once you understand it and you set, it affects the plan, right? How to do it. What is the actions you need to take in order to, or the steps? Is it 5 steps or 20 steps? So definitely, I'm sure my colleagues also have interesting experience, but it's always interesting to find new stuff and to fine tune the interaction with different people from different cultures.
Elvira, is there something you've experienced?
Yeah, in fact, well, as I mentioned before, I was working on the settlement of the AM function in a very big company. and in a multi-country environment.
Mhm.
So we had in the team different people from different countries. And something that is, for me, is basic for setting an agile organization is first that the management is involved and also that management integrates agile procedures in their way of communication, in their way of taking decisions, and in the way of defining a basic organization and providing the basic tools for the team. And something that is also very important, and it may be key to be successful, is make the team to believe in the project, because the change management that usually takes this kind of implementing agile environments involve a lot of changes in the way that people work. And the team that is working and that is involved have to believe very strongly in the project. Otherwise, it could be in risk.
Well, let's on that note, let's get into this and some maybe more practical sort of features of this and the solutions, and really how we can start, or how you start bringing people along on this journey to agility, how you sort of take traditional companies and get them on that path. And John, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about how that process begins for you.
Yeah, so I think it has to be met with a reason why you're doing it, and I think if we use additive as a proxy for this discussion, it's a good one, because additive is disruptive and it's multidisciplinary. And this kind of challenges a lot of constructs. And so, for example, if you don't appreciate designing for additive, then you'll be lucky to actually meet your business objectives with it. So that means that you have to put a certain amount of resource into bringing some group of people up to the same level of appreciation. So we just see this a lot. Either people buy a machine and then expect magic to happen, I guess, or they fling their part at the process, and then they're surprised when it's not cheaper or better, or some cases it's kind of worse. And it's that inability to kind of take a step back and say, what do I need to do to make this thing? What am I really trying to achieve? I think that's the first question. And then if I'm trying to achieve something, and I always break it down because I was a program manager, schedule, scope, or cost. Are you trying to improve your schedule? Or are you trying to improve your performance? Or are you trying to improve cost? You can pick one. You can optimize for the second. You have to let the third float. A lot of people don't know what they're, going after, and that is a challenge. So, when we take all of that and you try to throw it against something like additive, it challenges this ability for a company or an organization to work together. And so, if your materials people aren't talking to your design people, aren't talking to your manufacturing people, if that's not already ingrained in the company culture, you're going to struggle with additive, and then that can force some companies to come around. So again, in and of itself, none of this is new. Designing for manufacturing is, as since I've been in the workplace, been a thing. This is a bit counterintuitive for people like myself who were kind of raised on leaving material there because it cost more to get it out. But, I think we're seeing an influx of younger people that have studied it now at the university level and appreciate the idea of that, but don't have the practical experience in manufacturing with this large existing workforce. So these are two waves kind of coming at each other. And if we get them to sort of mix, that would be great. But if all they do is collide, then it's going to be a problem.
Well, yeah, and I've certainly heard that take before. Yes, and you mentioned legacy, and you mentioned some of the reasons people resist these changes as well. Elvira, I wonder if you could maybe tell us about your approach and how you sort of start to bring traditional companies on this journey, and how you start setting up an AM function as an enterprise. What are the building blocks here?
Yes, sure. Maybe I would like to share my experience in two very different companies, that it's a big enterprise and a startup. So I would like to share some slides. Yes. Yeah. So, well, we are talking about building blocks. That's correct. Well, something that is very is basic to be taken into account for building of setting up the AM function in a company. No matter how big the company is to take into account basic considerations that are the applicability of additive manufacturing to the business. The business model define the correct business model for the company. Besides, we have to take into account that this is a digital manufacturing technology, so we have to consider the confluence between IT, between information technology and also operational technology, since the conception of the function and since the conception of the solution for the company. And also to take into account that it is a special process. So there is, that means that there is a relevant influence in multivariable interactions and many different parameters that that brings into the equation. So that would be the basic building block. The second step would be the knowledge, as I mentioned, but the nature of the technology, the scope of knowledge that needs to be covered is very wide. So, well, having in mind the core business of the company, that is also fundamental. AM function cannot be built independently or only by AM experts. So you have to work with experts also in the business, and but also cover all the knowledge related with the digital side of the technology and the knowledge on the specific technological aspects of design for additive manufacturing, technologies, processes, etc. So the third step of building blocks are the resources that you have available to build this function. That is first the company itself, so the current organization, the potential growth, the mission, the values that is have to be considered as a resource itself, and also the equipment available, the tools, and the production model and the sites, if you are talking about one site or multi-site, infrastructure available. So everything will define what you have, what you need, and how to get it. And yes, to share my experience, as I mentioned, of building an AM function in a big company and a small one, is just how to bring the building blocks together. In a big company, what we did was bringing together engineers, designers, business consultants, and technologies experts in cybersecurity, in big data and analytics, and cloud developers. And well, we put to work together. We provided training in IT technology to engineers and training in additive manufacturing to IT technologies. We put to work all of them together and learning from each other, and that brought very successful outputs in building products and services. The experience on setting up a startup was that I had to start from zero. There were not resources, so we brought together the knowledge from the co-founder and established a very strong partnership as a solid building block as well. So something that is very important is to count with strong partners. Mm-hmm. And in our case, our growth is based in attracting multifunctional talent and training them to make the company grow.
Great. So you mentioned training there, and you've mentioned the importance of knowledge and having a strong partner. And John, I know you do training courses for some of the organizations you work with. How does this work then? Do you go in with the view to do training or a view to do consulting, or how do you assess the needs really, and how does that dialogue between yourself and your partner organization proceed?
Well, it's a bit of a proxy for the Agile piece, and I will say ADDvance is our partner in Spain on training, so there's a connection there. But we've done both. We've had companies approach us about training, and in that mind, they're open to it. They already know that they need to push this information or knowledge out into their organization. Whereas sometimes we start with consulting projects, and it's identified in that process that for them to be successful, it's about amplifying the message, and teaching is a bit different than being a subject matter expert. And so, there's a lot of things that go into training. We like to use the word a lot, but we pride ourselves on having brought in educational experts. We have Tim Simpson from Penn State, for example, and we have a very structured training program, with assessments and a pedagogy, et cetera, so that there's some science in how people absorb and retain information. Through the training courses that we do, though, it's a bit of an example of change management. And so we'll go through the usual episodes of the 5 whys, and it's not uncommon. We met with a very senior engineering team from a large heavy transportation company, and they said, well, AM isn't relevant to us because we make large, heavy steel castings. And I said, well, let's talk about requirements. And they said, yeah, well, those are the requirements. I said, so your customer demands that you make your product out of large, heavy steel castings? And they said, well, no. And I said, well, why are they heavy, and why are they steel, and why are they castings? And then we kind of went down that path, and it was like, okay, I see where you're going with this. And so then it's a recognition that additive is dynamic and kinetic, and it's not mature in all areas as it is in some areas. And so that same group, they were very accommodating and said, we do want to know when this is more applicable to us. We know that this is a fast-moving space, and we don't want to get left behind. We want to be on the forward-leaning side of it, so we do want to understand where it's at and where it's likely to be headed. And that's really the best use of training. For us, the best cases are people that are open to it. So we've got partners in like Baker Hughes, and that's a very good example. They've started off with a center of excellence, and they've got a dozen, they're experts in what they do, but they're not experts. And then pushing that information to the 40,000 engineers that work for Baker Hughes, that's a very different proposition. And so our customer there, Anjani, she's astute enough to know that if she's going to push change for her to be successful, and this kind of hits at one of the questions, her metric is that she needs to get other people to allow her to be successful. She needs to convince them that they're part of that solution, and therefore providing training to those people and imparting knowledge to it actually helps her, do that. So she needs those champions in her organization that enable her to be successful.
Gil, I want to get to you in a moment to talk about the channel partners, but as John touched on Camilla's question there about KPIs and which ones should be tracked by a company who wants to transform into an agile organization. I'm interested to hear your thoughts briefly on that, and I'll ask you as well in a bit, Elvira, the same question.
You're asking me? Sorry.
Yes, sorry, Gil. Yes.
I thought you were talking to John. Sorry, can you repeat?
Yes,
sorry.
Of course. If an organization is in the process of transforming into an agile organization, what would be some useful KPIs to track?
Yeah, well, so it has to be measurable, right? So if a company wants to go agile, then they have to set, let's say, a certain plan with achievable goals, but that can be measured in a way that at the end of the process, or you have some steps throughout the process to make sure that you follow them. And if, let's say, you go to a certain department and they manufacture a certain part, right, of a product, and they do it in traditional methods, so they can set a goal of out of 100 parts in 3 years, they want 15 or 20% to do with additive manufacturing, right? And inside this should be certain steps in order for them to get. And to get there, they will need to have the right training, the right tools, right? Softwares, hardware, and of course, what my colleague said, the understanding of the whole company or the people involved to be aligned that this is what they want to achieve. If it's one person or one group, it will never happen because everybody will fail them, not even by intention, but they have to be all of them aligned because it's so many moving pieces in order to get to where they want to go.
Could I just jump in there?
Of course, yes.
Yeah, so I think the KPI one's an interesting one because it's the only way that this is going to happen. That's what people respond to. The big companies everybody has annual objectives and they work towards those things. And so I think there has to be sort of soft ones and hard ones. And so, kind of what Gil's suggesting there, we've actually seen it where, it's actually really important that you focus on getting a number of applications just to be evaluated. Whether they're successful or not almost isn't the point in the early days. It's simply saying that you want the applications. Whether they're successful ultimately becomes important because you do need this to be transforming to something. But in the early days, it's just about overcoming the inertia. It's getting people to think about it. And if they start, the more that they come up with an application and then it ultimately maybe it doesn't work out. Well, why doesn't it work out? Mm-hmm. So those are the KPIs that kind of need to be done in the early days, I think, to really help people transform into thinking, being more agile, more accepting of, in a sense, it's a little bit of an acceptance of failure, but failure equates to learning. And if the learning then doesn't attach to a business objective, then it was a waste of time. So, that's the way I, think about the linearity of that process. Okay.
Elvira, I'm wondering whether you've got anything you'd add into the idea of KPIs and metrics here.
Well, what I would like to share at this point is that something that is very important is to have in mind and always present, which is the business model that wants to be set and to be successful, and then define the KPIs that are relevant for that business model. And something that is also very important is also have the customer in the center of the organization and build the organization around which is valuative and valuable for the customer, and that will also define the KPIs that have to be set. That's important.
Absolutely. Okay, so Gil, let's talk a bit more about channel partners, and in particular how channel partners can help with finding the right solutions for an organization that they are serving as an intermediary, as a vendor for. And perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your experience there in the field and how this operates, please.
Sure. So if we take it to the practical way of working, at the end of the day, a certain company, which is a 3D printing reseller, steps into the facility of a company, and they need to sell them the solution. I will put some presentations on to give you the background of how it works. So before that, just a small background. So we're working with a big network. Okay, and in this network, we have 3D printing startups where most of them, and this is the companies that we're looking for, are the ones that are offering faster printers, more materials, larger parts to produce, and a solution that, in their vision, right, can help organization manufacture parts. So this is one side. On the other side, you have the resellers that at the end of the day, they are choosing the product they want to sell and they step into the customer. So I can to understand how they can help in order to help companies adopt additive manufacturing into organization. I set up two definitions of resellers, two types. The first one is a box mover. Okay, and I just define it in a very simple way. The one that are selling different kind of solutions, and usually they are hardware focused, right? And they sell all kind of brands, and they step into the customer and they tell him, "Hey, Mr. Customer, I saw your manufacturing line or your lab. Where should I put the printer? Over there. Thank you very much. Tomorrow someone will come to do the training. Just make sure that I get paid." And it's okay, it's business. But they are just focusing on selling hardware. This is the first type. The second type is a solution provider, right? And the solution provider usually is a reseller that is minimum 5 to 10 years in the business. They're very knowledgeable, and they sell both hardware and software, meaning that they have the bird eye view to understand that when they step into the organization to look and to understand the way they work, the last thing is to offer a certain printer. The first thing is to understand their needs and where are the bottlenecks. And talking about solutions, so a solution provider, a reseller, it doesn't necessarily sell all of these solutions, but he understands the concept of the end-to-end digital manufacturing workflow. And in this, no matter what he sells or the customer needs, he's supposed to address the following three pillars of the solutions. The first one is 3D software solutions that include design or simulation, right? Before printing in the metal printer, you have some simulation software. As John said, topology optimization or work management in case of 3D Mind. All the setup of the software that's supposed to help in the process or support throughout the process before even you start. The second, 3D printers, of course, and the ones that are suitable to do, let's say, functional prototyping or end-use parts. And this could be, either printers that offer high-performance materials, thermoplastics, metals, and others. And the last step, which is also coming into awareness in the past time, is automated processing. So if you have all the software, all the printers, at the end of the day, you fill up a room with 200 parts, and someone needs to do the support removal, the surface finish, and the dyeing. Right? So when I step together with a reseller to a customer side, first, we do our homework, and we understand that we need to understand what is their workflow today. And usually it involves traditional methods, right? And where and how you can implement all of these three pillars. At the end of the day, together with them, we connect all the dots, because the software company that doing the simulation, they don't really understand the full process of printing. They have a certain clue, or the automated processing. So a reseller, a good reseller, is half a consultant, half a solution provider, and he steps to get to the customer, analyzing his needs, understanding the bottlenecks, and then tailoring down a solution with all the solution of the three pillars. That this is a value reseller, and if companies want to implement 3D printing in their design manufacturing processes, they need someone to help them. And the reseller is also a consulting company, etc. But a reseller at the end of the day can do it very well.
Okay, excellent. Well, before we get into the final section of the conversation today, I'd just like to ask everybody who's on the call whether you think, oh gosh, what's happened here? There we go. Whether you think your organization you work for, whichever one that is, and this is, so we won't see which organization you do work for, so please feel free to answer as truthfully as you like. Whether that organization is, you would describe it as Agile. So here we go. So this poll should now be active on your screens, and please let us know. We'll come back to that in a moment. Right, let's get into the final sort of part of the discussion today, really, which is, I suppose what we really want to know is what are the benefits and how this ties back into distributed manufacturing here. So really what I'm looking for here is to talk more about success stories. And we did have a question in the chat earlier about examples of pioneering companies, and Schneider Electric was named as one there. So if it's possible to go into that company, I don't know. There's obviously going to be some NDAs here, but perhaps Gil, maybe you could get into into a bit of your experience. What's the benefit here, and bring this all back to sort of practical reality?
So one of the nice examples I had a few years back, I was visiting Philips headquarters in Drachten in Netherlands, and they had the vision of using additive manufacturing inside their organization. And the first stop was in their AM center. So there was one guy who was responsible for, let's say, I think 7 or 8 printers in different technologies. And all the people inside the organization that wanted to print parts had to call him or to ask him, and he was managing this process internally. And then they said, okay, now we understand that one guy cannot only do it, and it cannot be in a certain facility, it has to be spread out throughout the manufacturing line in a way. And they took me to a tour, and they said, let's make a small tour in the manufacturing line. It will not take long. So it was a 4-hour tour, which was amazing. And in the line that they were manufacturing shavers, electrical shavers. And I was amazed how many parts you need to have to assemble a shaver. At the end of the day, we made this tour, and then we went back to the room, and they showed us the part, and they said, can we print this? Okay, no. Can we print this part? Yes or no? They were so eager to do it. And then we understood, okay, we need to have a clear plan at what is doable and what is not, what you can manufacture and what you can use for prototyping. Maybe you can use it for jigs and fixtures. And it was an amazing journey just to set up a plan, which took several months, right? And at the end of this process, they got the blessing of the management, of course. And of course, they printed a certain shaver to the CEO, and they brought it after doing the post-processing, etc. They were smart, and they gave it to him, and he said, okay, what's happening here? No, it was 3D printed. At that moment, the CEO was aligned with the vision, okay, we need to use additive manufacturing. And then they got the budget, and they got, all the alignment of the management and the company. So for me, it was just amazing. And they were skeptical at the beginning, right? They would say, yeah, no, we have, everything works okay. No, we can use 3D printing to print some giveaways or whatever. And this journey started, it went out through several years, and it was really nice to see it when they really want to do it, and the internal intention to do it, and the CEO is in it, so it's happening.
It's happening. And Elvira, you were telling us a bit about before we sort of bring in the audience in about working in the railway sector with a client. Maybe you could tell everybody about that one, please.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we can share experience with a specific customer. That's when we started working with them. They had identified additive manufacturing as an interesting technology for their business. That is absolutely correct in railway sector. So the management had designated a team of 12 engineers of different, from design, from manufacturing, quality, production, maintenance. And they had been working together for 1 year at that moment, setting up a meeting weekly and sharing different, potential use cases, discussing internally. That work had during 1 year for 12 people meeting weekly. So had meant more than 100,000 euros of working of money. They had already invested that amount of money. Plus, they had also paid a full master for 2 of these engineers. That means almost 20,000 euros more to the project. They had bought 2 different 3D printers just to get used with the technology, but it was just for prototypes because there was not industrial equipment. So they had spent close to 150,000 euros in a project, and at that moment they had identified 15 potential references that would be set to additive manufacturing, and they had built 2 prototypes and that they were validating, the prototypes had been manufactured by a third party because their equipment was not prepared for that. So with that scenario, what we proposed is working intensively with them in well, we defined a first project, a first proof of concept for 3 months. We provided advisory, expert advisory, also not only in technology, but also in business and in application of additive manufacturing. We provide a full training for the full team, and we perform an automatic inventory analysis using a Speed Your Mind tool. The result was that in less than 3 months, more than 200 references were identified. 20 of them had been already validated technically and economically. 10 prototypes had been manufactured and were sent to validation. So for a fourth of the cost and a fourth of the time they had spent before, we got, well, 5 times more results using the correct tool, defining a correct business model, and defining procedures to work in an agile way. So I think that is the most relevant success story that we can tell, and it is just basic in getting advice from experts and set the correct or the most appropriate structure and organization to work with a new technology in the company.
Okay, I realize we're up against the clock here, so maybe John, I'd just like to ask you quickly about the importance of working with a channel partner for long-term success, and is there are there issues to be aware of when selecting a channel partner or technology in general?
Yeah, so I think the channel partner in some ways is a proxy for everybody knowing what they're doing.
Oh, you're a bit quiet.
Right, okay. Not sure what's gone on. Can you hear me?
Yes, well, a little bit. That's yeah, persevere.
Right. So I think it's a question of choosing the right supply chain to be a part of, and knowing what you're going to do versus what you're going to rely on other people to do.
Oh, it's actually gone very quiet. I'm not sure if that's the same for everybody. Maybe we'll come back to that one because we are getting close to the end. So let's take a quick look at the poll, and well, 87% say yes, their organization is agile. Possibly no surprise though of the sort of audience we get, and people certainly working at sort of frontiers of technology and early adopters of additive. I think we could have expected that. Is that a surprise to you at all, Gil?
It's a bit surprised. Maybe the question they think was, would you like your organization to be agile, right? It's a matter of a definition. But I'm very encouraged from this kind of a question, because this kind of answer, because first people understand what agile means.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So and they think what makes their organization agile, and it means that either they're there or they're getting there. So that's good.
And Elvira, coming back to you, do you have any final tips or takeaways for people looking to build an agile organization?
Yeah, I was on mute. Yes, something that I think I consider very important is just to get advice by independent experts, because as we have mentioned before, I think Gil already talked about that. Well, people that don't want to sell you just a machine, and instead of that, want to help you to get the end-to-end solution. Also, having training not only in technology but also in business and implementation of additive manufacturing. something that it's important and for small companies and for startups is count on multifunctional profile. That is something that is very important, and build a strong partnerships and strong channel partners that help you to grow at the end. That is something.
Great. Well, that's going to have to be the final word for now. I realize we haven't got to all the questions today, but if you want to carry on the conversation, I've just shared the link to the LinkedIn group that's been set up around these regular conversations. The next Free Your Mind Freely Friday talk show will be taking place at the end of January. We'll have more information in the group about that. I'd really like to thank you, Elvira, for joining us. Gil and John, thank you very much for taking time out today. And I wish you all a wonderful Christmas wherever you're spending it. And until next time, thank you also to the audience for joining us. And thank you, Free Your Mind and American Mates for supporting the event. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for the hospitality.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Goodbye.